in a nicer paradoxical joke. Do you know the one about red ink that I use all the time?
No.
No, it's a wonderful joke. It's dead air joke, early 60s. Dead air guy is sent to work in Siberia. And he tells his friends, you know, when I will write you from there, I know my letters will be censored. So let's make a deal. When I'm writing you truth, it will be normal blue or dark ink, but when I write it in red, it's a lie. And then they get first letter from Soviet Union.
Yeah.
And he said, it's wonderful here. Girls are beautiful. You can see Western films. Shops are full. You can buy everything in the stores, except red ink. They don't have red ink. And this is, I think, a deep insight. Namely, deep insight in the sense that even today, what we are missing is red ink. That is to say, the very language to see in what sense we are not free. You know, the first step towards freedom is to become aware in what sense you are not free, to see your unfreedom, you know, and others.
Do you think so?
Yes, don't you think so?
I don't.
Really? Strike, hit.
No, I don't feel that. I think that I don't think you can know what a loss is until you've lost it, until you have this experience of being free. And is there a word in German called Sehnsucht, longing?
Sehnsucht, yeah.
Yeah, that I think the recovery of freedom is a kind of longing for something you knew before.
You see, here maybe...
You know what I'm saying? But
yeah.
I'm saying this psychologically, the way people grow up as children, that they know something about the fact that they can move, that they are able to do this and not that. And then they're repressed.
But I tend to agree with you nonetheless. I think
you do.
I would just add another turn of the screw, more pessimist. That, yeah. But I think you cannot... Maybe this is my East European upbringing.
Yeah.
I don't think you can experience freedom directly. You experience freedom through an obstacle. My God, why am I not able to do that? I think we are now on the right path. Everybody focuses just on WikiLeaks' secret documents. I think maybe our Ecuadorian lazy guy who just sleeps there, his greatest achievement is, you know, he published a book which was strangely ignored on Google, demonstrating this is also the answer of those detractors of Julian who say, but why he doesn't publish more about Russia and so on.
Which he did. He published
Which first he did. Second point. But listen, Russia, China, we all know what shitty authoritarian countries these are. But as two of you already hit that, his greatest breakthrough in his writing with Google and so on is that the greatest tragedy is how nobody is duped there. They live in authority, but we, or in the United States, we think we are free. We have media, we can use them freely, they help us. But in this way, how we are even more controlled, directed, and so on. Listen, what is the typical guy today? You don't even experience yourself as a proletarian. You are precarious worker, you choose this job, that, and the new fashionable word is a self-entrepreneur. Like I'm doing the same thing as my billionaire friend, which I can just erase a couple of zeros and so on. So you see, our very unfreedom, this total anxiety is sold us as a new freedom. You don't have a permanent job, wonderful. You can reinvent yourself every 2 years, construct new identity and so on. That's, I think, ideologically, at a more general level, the big lesson of WikiLeaks. Yes, we agree, we know Putin, China, shitty countries, authoritarian, but don't think that our Western liberal countries are also not in some way even more menacing, totalitarian.
Especially Silicon Valley, what you mentioned.
Yeah,
Google,
Facebook,
Instagram.
Because our unfreedom is presented to us precisely as our new freedom. I'm free, I look on Google, I can choose whatever you want, and so on and so on. That's, I think, where he really hits the core of our Western liberal ideology. That's why I love him. Return to it later. Our spontaneous today ideological notion of freedom is freedom of choice. As if the model of freedom is you go to a patisserie and decide strawberry cake or chocolate cake. No, for me, the highest freedom, and I speak very ancient metaphysical language here, is freedom to do something not out of a free choice, but because you cannot do it otherwise, to put it simply. Let's take, say, your country, pathetic example, is under occupation. And the greatest act of freedom is to join resistance, risk your life. But you don't reason, I have a choice now, do this, do that. No, you do it because you cannot do it otherwise. Or let me give you another example, very pathetic one, falling in love. You never have a choice. I mean, if you look around, that girl or boy or animal, so that you will not accuse me of metaphysical, binary logic thinking, whatever. You never go around and make a choice. I love you more than you. The moment you do this, it's not love. Love is that you never fall in love. All of a sudden, you discover that you are already in love. The choice is always already made. And that's the highest freedom, maybe. But let's not get lost into it. I will now begin with the first paradox that I see of freedom today. Freedom, I mean here how we experience freedom. Did you notice, and this is what my title refers to, how in our universe, possible and impossible are distributed in a strange way when we speak about freedom. On the one hand, in the domain of personal freedoms or technology, the impossible is more and more possible, or so we are told. Nothing is impossible. We can enjoy sex in all its perverse versions, and I mean it quite literally. 2 years ago in New York, I met a chirurg, a surgeon, whose specialty is to cut a penis into two. And somehow he can do it in such a refined way that a man can have sex with two women in the same way, and so on and so on. Nothing is impossible. All archives of music are accessible to us. Going into space will be soon available for everyone, with money, of course. There is the prospect of enhancing our physical, psychic abilities, and so on and so on. You know, the tech-gnostic perspective of achieving immortality by changing our identity into a software, and we just download oneself from one to another hardware. So everything is possible here. But did you notice how everything is possible at this level? Intense personal experiences, technological, scientifically generated transformations. But on the other hand, in the domain of social and economic relations, our era perceives itself as the era of maturity, in which, with the collapse of communist states, humanity has abandoned the old millenarian utopian dreams and accepted the constraints of reality, which of course means capitalist reality, with all its impossibilities. So at the same way we are being told maybe we will become immortal, you can enjoy any way you want or whatever, but at the same time we are bombarded by a whole series of you cannot engage in large collective acts. We are told if you do this, we will end in totalitarian terror. We cannot keep alive old welfare state. It makes us non-competitive, it leads to economic crisis. We cannot isolate ourselves from global market, and so on and so on. We even have the ideological version of this limitation, a leftist one. I noticed how ecology also tends to function like this. Namely, it feeds into this obsession with setting a limit. Temperature can rise, and I think this is totally irrational. We are told global temperature for 2 degrees Celsius. If it's more, it's the end of civilization, global warming, and so on. So, on the other hand, it's this desperate search for limit, for what we cannot do. So, we live in strange times where, to put it in a funny way, one phrase, maybe we will become immortal, everything is possible, but it's not possible to raise taxes 1% to give more money to education. That's our reality. So maybe the time has come to rearrange our notions of possible and impossible. What is possible, what is impossible? Here is an extreme case of what is perceived as impossible today. Mario Monti, you know who he is, recently said, I quote, "Those who govern must not allow themselves to be completely bound by parliamentarians," end of quote. Which then is, for Monti, the higher force whose authority can suspend the decisions of a democratically elected body, representative of the people. Already back in 1998, the answer was given by Hans Dittmeier, at that time the governor of Deutsche Bundesbank, who praised national governments for preferring, it's, quote, a wonderful expression, the permanent plebiscite of global markets to the plebiscite of the ballot box. I think it's a wonderful ideological manipulation. Dittmeier keeps the democratic rhetoric, but he claims global markets are more democratic than parliamentary elections since the process of voting goes on in them permanently and is permanently reflected in market fluctuations, not only every 4 years, and at a global level, not only within the limits of a nation state. So the underlying idea is that, freed from this higher control of markets and experts, parliamentary democratic decisions are irresponsible. True democracy is thus the democracy of the markets. And it's even true that a new form of religion is emerging here. Did you notice how we are gradually entering an area of new animism? Market, although we all rationally know that market is just some kind of a hypostasized agency which doesn't really exist, it's a reified form of the chaotic result of our individual decisions, we nonetheless spontaneously talk as if market is a living being which reacts. We hear again and again, not in religious supplements to daily newspapers, but in economic reports, how market expressed its worry, we should satisfy the demand of the market, and so on, as if it's a living being. This, then, is where we stand with regard to democracy and freedom. And I think the big economic financial agreements like TISA or TIP are perfect examples of this state of things. The key decisions concerning our economy are negotiated and enforced in secrecy, out of sight, with no public debate. In this way, the space for decisions of the democratically elected political agents is very limited, and the political process deals predominantly with issues towards which capital is indifferent, like cultural wars. I mean, with all my sympathy for gay rights, abortion rights, and so on and so on, I claim that now I speak as an animist, as if capital is a person. I claim that capital quite likes these struggles. It means we leave big economic decisions behind and we fight cultural wars. This is why I think in our societies, free choice is elevated into a supreme value. Why? Because we live in a formally democratic society, society of freedom, which means that social control and domination can no longer appear directly as a limit on subject freedom. They have to appear as the very self-experience of free individuals. Now you will say, how is this possible? That our very unfreedom appears to us that we experience it as our freedom. Where? There are many forms of this appearing of unfreedom in the guise of its opposite. For example, when we are deprived of universal health care, We are told that we are given a new freedom of choice. Like the idea is if you are automatically given universal health care, totalitarian state decides on it, but now you are given a free choice. Will you invest the surplus of your money or your credit money for health care, or will you go a holiday, and so on and so on? You have a new freedom of choice. When we no longer can rely on a long-term employment, and when we are compelled to search for a new precarious work every year, every second year, we are again told that we are given the opportunity to reinvent ourselves and discover new, unexpected creative potentials that lurked in our personality. I read, this is the ultimate obscenity in some capitalist small circulation journal in the United States, a wonderful argumentation for precarious work, which, that's the irony, explicitly referred to Judith Butler and all those who advocate this kind of experimentally constructed nature of human identity. They say precarious work means new freedom. You are given a chance to reinvent yourself every year, every second year. Your identity is no longer fixed by society, and so on and so on. When we have to pay for the education of our children, we are told that we become entrepreneurs of the self, acting like a capitalist who has to choose freely how he will invest the resources he possesses or borrowed into education, health, travel, and so on and so on. That's the ideology today. We are all capitalists. Even if you are a poor worker and you get some credit, 10,000 francs, let us say, you are free to decide. Will you invest it into your education to earn more? Will you invest it in your children's education? Will you invest it in your health? Or will you simply spend it for a holiday? But the idea is that, okay, I'm investing 5,000, my capitalist friend is investing 5 billion. But who cares? It's just, as they were singing here, quantitative difference. We are all capitalists. So we more and more experience our freedom as what it effectively is, a burden that deprives us of the true choice, the choice of change. Because I think if the word Freiheit, freedom, has any actual meaning today, we have to move beyond this category of the freedom of choice. True freedom is not the freedom of choice. True freedom is the freedom to collectively change the very conditions of choice. What can you choose, and so on. You know, that's what some, at least neoliberals, don't get. That, how to put it, in order for us to be actually free, again, if these words have any meaning today, then quite a dense network of social conditions, rules, regulations should be enacted as the background for it. Freedom doesn't mean I do whatever I want. Freedom means if I feel I can take a walk during the night around Zurich. But what does this imply? That most people rely on certain respect, certain basic rules of safety, that I can rely on police protection, and so on and so on. A whole network of things have to be here. And I don't have time to go into it further. I'm even more and more tempted to say that freedom is, in a good sense, a dogmatic category. We say today we are being told we shouldn't be dogmatic. We should think critically about everything. Usually, you know where I usually hear this argument for non-dogmatic spirit? With American right-wing liberals who want to justify torture now. No, I think that the measure of the freedom of a society, freedom in a positive sense, is a certain healthy dogmatism. Now you will say I'm crazy, but let me give you an example. Let us say, would you like to live in a society where you would have to argue all the time that women shouldn't be raped? I mean, there is something wrong with this society. I would like to live in a society where, when some stupid man argues, but you know, women really like it, they just pretend not to like it, and so on, that you don't have to argue. He simply dismissed as not even funny, an eccentric idiot or whatsoever. The moment you have to argue about it, there is something wrong with this society. And that's what is also wrong at a more general level today with our ethical standards. For me, the fiasco was not that torture became acceptable, but that we even accepted the debate about it. This is for me a clear social regression. 20 years ago, no one would even have been thinking about possibility of torture. Now, if you are a cynicist, you would tell me, yeah, cynic, yeah, but we all know torture was going on. Here, as a good bourgeois, well-mannered communist, I believe in superficial manners, in rules of politeness. We should absolutely reject this cynical argument, but torture is going on all the time. It's not just United States, Guantanamo, Russia, China. They're torturing like crazy. So isn't it better to openly admit it and set some rules about it? I think absolutely no. Not only for the realist, pragmatic reason that in this way, even more torture would have been going on, but, you know, let me be quite open. I can imagine myself torturing someone in an extreme situation. Let's be ridiculous. Let me improvise this totally ridiculous situation. My small daughter, whom I love, is kidnapped by terrorists, and I have in my basement one mean terrorist who smiles at me. Haha, I know where your daughter is. Sorry for the tasteless example. But in such a ridiculous example, I can well imagine torturing him. But you see my point. It shouldn't be normalized. It should, even here I have some doubts, but at least, even if out of despair, I were to torture the guy, it should have remained something totally unacceptable that I did out of despair. It shouldn't be normalized. So again, what then should we do apropos this deadlock? Where, again, and that's our basic paradox today, the more we are free at the level of personal freedoms, you can read what you want, more or less, you can travel where you want, you can get a job that you want, if you get it, of course. But this freedom is more and more constrained by a more basic unfreedom. Like, as if the social economic system in which we live is, if not the best possible, at least the least bad, and you can't do anything there. If we will not refocus our energy on saving the commons, in the sense of if we will not see how there are some things which shouldn't be privatized, but in this I include state, that it's really a problem of all of us to keep it common. Common, again, neither state nor private property, but simply more than state, concerning us all. If we will not invent a forum to enact this, then I see only catastrophes. Because, for example, the ecological problems, I don't think that, although a lot can be done with proper taxing legislation, but I don't think that neither in capitalist way nor in state regulating way, ecological crisis can be effectively solved. The same, I think, goes into biogenetics. The third phenomenon, again, the commons of symbolic universe. You know, internet is a nice thing if it's truly public, and we know how from the very beginning, internet was never pure technology. I mean, I think that the defining moment was, I think, already in the mid-70s. Bill Gates wrote a famous letter claiming, but you who use this program, are you not aware that I did this program, that it's my property, and so on? So what I claim is that in the very early stages, internet functioned as commons. And then this was up to a point even a very violent process of privatizing these commons. And here we have another big problem. The problem is how market functions here. I think we should drop one myth of the market that, okay, it may be a cruel competition, but that the best guy wins. Not necessarily. Look, I don't know really in technological terms how, but all my friends who are good hackers are telling me, for example, that Linux and all that other internet languages, programs, are basically better than Windows, Microsoft. Nonetheless, Microsoft has almost monopoly, even if the other one is free and you have to pay for this one. So even in economy, there are now some interesting theories who say that when you have competition, that again, what determines who wins is not the best quality, the one who feeds the demands. It's a different self-generating mechanisms where, how should I put it, the question of victory doesn't have a lot to do with quality. It's more the type of marketing, how you create conditions, and so on and so on. So again, this is another domain. It would have been horrible, for example, to live in where, let's be frank, internet is more and more developing into kind of a collective mind, like we literally float in it. Any aspect of privatization there, I think it's potentially horrible. It can have horrible, because, you know, slowly internet is becoming like our symbolic cloth. You are naked without it. You cannot even communicate. And here, as we know from China and so on, not only private property, but private property or even state control can be catastrophic. So again, I think that all these tendencies are not in the old Leninist way, but nonetheless somehow for me reactualizing the basic problem of communism, that at a certain point we have to assert commons, things which should be shared there, not as a limitation of our freedom, but as the very space for our freedom. Because you know what is an interesting lesson also from intelligent philosophers, that there is no opposition between freedom and following social rules. Freedom is, for example, how are we free as humans? The space, if we were not to have a very complex set of rules, like you address me, I answer. If you see me falling down, you help me, of how we interact. Without this, we would have some kind of abstract freedom, but it would immediately turn into some kind of a total terror. I would have met you, you look at me, I wouldn't even know what this means, how to react, and so on. This is a very nice dialectical insight, how freedom is only possible against a complex, very complex network of rules of interaction, politeness, and so on and so on. Here, we must be communists. What are the communal, precisely, conditions of freedom?